Hello, everybody. It's Dave Neal, stand-up comic and host of the Rush Hour podcast. We have a Blake Lively, Justin Baldoni, Ryan Reynolds update. There's a lot to get into in this video, so definitely stick around. I'm going to be sharing an update to the Redditor, that's the person commenting on Reddit, who leaked information 6 months ago regarding sinister motivations by Blake Lively and Ryan Reynolds. Well, now that a lot of the information that they leaked 6 months ago we're now seeing was very accurate, we're going to look at some of the other comments that they've said about gross behavior, as they call it, using sexual harassment as a way to leverage the rights to a film. Also, an article that was from a few months ago that didn't really make sense at the time, which we're going to bring back into the limelight here, which was Ryan Reynolds discussing his attempt to, or a source discussing an attempt of Ryan Reynolds to buy the rights off of Justin Baldoni. So whether they wanted to buy the rights off of him, of the movie It Ends With Us, or strong-arm the sort of path to those rights, yet to be seen. Maybe they tried both. So I'm going to get into all of this. First, I want to say this tragic plane crash, helicopter crash that happened late last night it's just devastating, and I'm still getting a lot of the information, so I'm not going to talk about it here. I'll talk about it on the afternoon rush hour. My morning rush hour we recorded last night, and there was no information yet, but fingers were crossed that maybe there was some good that came out of the story, some survivors, and it's just not looking like that. So really just a sad story for really all of us Americans out here. Just senseless, completely avoidable. So again, we'll get into that in the afternoon rush. I did want to say, and I covered this last night, that it was a big day for the YouTube channel. Yesterday, we hit 100,000 subscribers. My wife surprised me today with these balloons right there. That's my studio. And white women love balloons. I don't know about any other ethnicities, but white women love balloons. I don't know if they didn't get enough balloons growing up as kids, but they love a good. She was like, babe, go give the baby a bath. And I was like, I'm late for work. She's like, go give him. And I come back and there's balloons everywhere. It smells like peppermint for some reason. So either way, thank you guys all so much for getting me over the hump to 100,000 subscribers. And you keep on, I mean, literally the ticker's been blowing my mind. It's not a big deal from an ego standpoint. It's a big deal because this audience has helped me literally get married, start a family, provide for my family, buy a home, buy a car, like all of these things. I was driving a 20-plus-year-old Toyota, living in a rent-controlled apartment, having my car battery stolen 5 times, living in Koreatown, Los Angeles. And for those that have been along from the journey from 500 square feet and where we are now, I thank you guys all so much. I truly do. The amount of gratitude I have, I'm unable to properly illustrate the abundances that you guys have provided with your watch time. That's what it all came down to. So anyhow, we're going to jump into this. I'm going to share the comments from the Redditor. They'll blow your mind, so stick around for that. But here's what else is going to blow your mind. This idea of mainstream media still getting this story wrong is insane. This is, and again, I don't blame the author, but this is an article from yesterday that says, it never ends with us. There's a clear arc emerging in the Blake Lively, Justin Baldoni scandal, and it doesn't look good for anyone, least of all you. So these articles, I just don't think they understand or speak on behalf of the majority of how people feel. So they talk about Justin Baldoni sending a voice note to Blake Lively at 2 a.m. and no place doesn't mention who was responding to her 1:50 a.m. voice note. It mentions that they plan to sue Blake Lively into oblivion, just using quotes from crisis PR people that don't have greater context. It's really not a good sign from media if people are just reading articles like this. I mean, how about this? Justin Baldoni made comment on Blake Lively's boobs in 2 a.m. voice memo. Are you kidding me? If this is all, and it's like, look, I get a good clickbait. I get it. But not when the collateral damage is somebody's livelihood, reputation. He's a father, husband, and dad. He's a dad and a husband, right? And again, if he was sending a 2 a.m. breathy voice memo, like, you got your boobs out? Like, okay, yeah, blast him. That's creepy as hell. But I feel as though the lack of context being provided by these articles is the reason why the internet continues to push back on these narratives. I mean, this article, at least the title of it, and most people don't get past the title, sadly, does not do this conversation justice whatsoever. So Yesterday we shared this. It went, or maybe, no, excuse me, this morning we shared this. It went super viral. There was a post from 6 months ago in the Colleen Hoover subreddit, which is a community, very niche community here of an author, Colleen Hoover, who wrote It Ends With Us. Well, this person, Motor Cow 9806, gave a lot of insight into what's going on. Talked about Blake Lively, and I'm sharing this again because I'm going to share new comments that were unearthed, but talked about Blake Lively and how Taylor Swift got the composer fired because she said, if you want to use my song, you can't use that guy. Which again, I don't mind that if you have a proper reason to get a composer fired. Was it, and by proper, I mean, did they do something that is unbecoming of, someone you want to be associated with? If you're Taylor Swift and you say that composer, it worked with Harvey Weinstein and was complicit, whatever. I'm not saying that that's what happened. I have no idea who the composer is. But if you have some moral reason, I can understand. Hey, if you want to use my stuff, you can't use them. But if it's like petty grievances, then we have an issue because it's like, come on, what are you doing? What are you doing? And again, I don't know what the beef is with that composer. That's a different story for a different time. But the main takeaway I got was the third bullet point. Blake goes to Sony and threatens to go to the New York Times with a story that says Justin was sexually harassing her on set if they don't let her have her own version. Now, if you were sexually harassed on set and you have the evidence and you went through the proper channels and whatnot, then this isn't really that big of a gotcha, because it's like, look, you say that happens, and then you go through HR, they don't do anything about it, and then you're like, all right, if you're not going to do anything about it, I'm going to leak this. I worked on this film. I want control of the post-production because I don't trust the director because he did X, Y, and Z to me. If that's the case, I think you can defend that. But if Justin called you sexy because you were insecure about your body, or some situation that's like, really, is that the punishment for the crime? That's a different conversation to have. And you might say, Dave, what are you talking about? No one should be, mistreated in the workplace. I agree. What's complicated here is separating the director Justin from the actor Justin, from the producer Justin, because the director's in charge of the artistic stuff, right? And then the actor is playing the role. And at what point did Blake feel the line was crossed, and where are the receipts for that? I was actually walking the baby and with my wife the other day, and I was like, honey, my wife's, she was a working model for over a decade, and she's worked with creeps left and right, because when you get into that world, there's a lot of creepy photographers and a lot of creepy people all over. I've seen it with my own eyes. It's disgusting. Probably way worse than the film world, but it's all connected, right? Because, it's a place where people traditionally have gotten away with things. Like Harvey Weinstein for a long time got away with monstrosities for a very, very long time. And I talked to my wife and I was like, if you had an issue on set, who would you text? What would you do about it? She said, well, I would definitely text you. I would definitely text my agent, the casting person. I would text the SAG reps. Here's the people I would talk to. I haven't seen any of that evidence that Blake has that. I don't think she would be hiding it at this point, since they were so willing to share all of the other evidence with the New York Times. I don't think that would be hiding. So where's the evidence that Blake was disgusted in the moment, not how you felt 2 months later? I can understand if it took you a day or 3 days, 72 hours to be like, oh my gosh, I was completely grossed out by what he did on Monday, and you send that on Wednesday. But at what point is it, this happened to me, versus, oh yeah, I remember that happened, and where's the evidence for that? Because it can be true, but if you don't have the evidence to back it up, sadly, what are people supposed to do here? What are we supposed to do? You don't put that on other people. So I'm going to get to the comments that were made by this person who's kind of like the Nostradamus of It Ends With Us drama, because a lot of the things they posted here 6 months ago are dead on accurate, we found out later. So now we know that this actually is credible. So now that there's credibility here from Motor Cow, we'll get into what Motor Cow said again in a second. Leanne Newton has been sharing a lot here and tagging me in it, and I wanted to read what she had to say on Twitter. On August 12th, someone posted on Reddit that Blake Lively was threatening to go to the New York Times. That's what I just shared. Candace Owens covered this in great detail, great journalism. With this knowledge, it now makes more sense as to why the New York Times appears to have the embedded text messages inserted into a document as early as Halloween. And that is what my video seems to be demonstrating. Not the date the messages were sent or they were extracted from the phone. I believe that the data shows they were in possession by New York Times at some point up to or on Halloween. And I was asking that question because I wasn't 100% sure. I was like, well, are these the dates that Blake screen grabbed these messages, or that the PR person screen grabbed them? Like, what's the metadata pointing to? Well, other people that are bigger in the tech world have said, oh yeah, no, this metadata shows it was when the New York Times embedded these texts. Now, what are they going to argue? Is the New York Times going to say, well, we were already going to make a story based on Justin Baldoni as the director of this film, so we already had the images up? That could be an argument. I don't know if it's a good one. But what I'm thinking I'm seeing here is the New York Times crisis people, because by golly, they know how to spin things. What I think we're seeing here is the New York Times saying, hey, we were being sent these leaks, so we were starting to acquire the information. We didn't have a story yet. We were just being sent all of this. Okay, sure. It really doesn't change the fact that they gave no time to Justin Baldoni to respond. If they had this story on Halloween, did they then have this story November 10th? You know, as a journalist, you're not supposed to hold on to a story. You're supposed to, that's bad ethics. You're supposed to report things as they come in. But the fact that they ended up pushing this story till, several days before Christmas, when everyone's traveling and mailing it in, you taking a nice long break, that's super sinister, knowing they're not going to get the full weight of Justin Baldoni's legal team responding to this, And again, what the truth is there, I'm sure the New York Times will quickly be trying to cover their own ass. So Leanne says, sounds like the New York Times may have been used as one of her dragons as far as leveraging Sony goes, and there may have been a plan in place to do this article the whole time. She allegedly threatened Sony with publicly accusing Baldoni of sexual harassment via the New York Times to get her own with them throughout the production of the film. The messages on Baldoni's lawsuit show Sony passing on a Taylor Swift threat if they did not produce the art and waive the film by credit. So that seemed to be a regular occurrence. She allegedly got control of the film by threatening Baldoni and Heath with accusations. After she got everything she wanted and the film was a success, she allegedly had the New York Times ready to go months before she filed her complaint. And that's the information that was shared here, which was, again, screen grabbed. And we already shared this video yesterday of the metadata dating back to October 31st. Let's push ahead to what Citizen Journalist posted. These are the updates that come from Motor Cow. So they said, good morning, citizens, and this is from minutes ago. There is still some leftover tea in the pot from yesterday's revelation from a Reddit user who 6 months ago posted how things were fine on set of It Ends With Us. How things went fine in set of It Ends With Us. Below are her comments in this thread for those who haven't seen them. So this is Motor Cow again. Why can't it be both? She does sound like a nightmare. Hold on, let me make this smaller. She does sound like a nightmare. I don't know the percentages of whose cut it was, that being Taylor or Justin's, but they hired another very famous editor who is not credited to fix the problems that were in her cut. So it's definitely not just hers. At the very least, Sony has stepped in to fix a lot. I don't know how much of Justin's made it in, though. So we don't know who the source is. It's anonymous. They said they're friends with someone who's very on the inside. They must be, my belief is, someone who would be on set for production, but also post-production. So to me, that feels like someone on the producer level. If it's just an editor, then they wouldn't have known the on-set issues, unless it was being relayed as an editor by Justin himself. So again, we don't know who this is, but these are the comments coming in that they have now unearthed from months ago. I think this looks just as bad on Blake, to be honest. Leveraging a sexual harassment PR nightmare so you can get your way is gross behavior, regardless of what Justin said. So if you're Blake and you're just trying to leverage a sexual harassment PR nightmare, my thought is you would never want this to go public for reasons that we're seeing right now, which is the ability by the internet to cross-examine. As you guys know from the Bachelor Clayton case we were covering, we were able to unearth insane amounts of fraud from a woman faking cancer, faking pregnancy. I think it'll be a documentary someday as the story still goes on. County prosecutors are investigating this lady. I've been covering this story for years and threatened with lawsuits, and I had to raise money for my own legal battles because I was being threatened with a $120 million defamation suit. But the point of what I'm trying to say is this lady, Laura Owens, who was threatening Clayton Echard and myself, she didn't want any of this to go public. She wanted to threat people privately, because you can get away with a lot of threats when you make them to people, in the dark. But we always say this, sunlight is the greatest disinfectant. And when you get the bandwidth of the internet behind something, good golly, they are going to do a level of investigative work that no law firm could ever get away hiring. Trust me when I say Justin Baldoni's lawyer is checking out this stuff. The metadata from the New York Times, 1,000% will be in their court documents now, thanks to you, thanks to the internet, Twitter, Reddit, all these other places where people come together. And it's almost like imagine if you're a lawyer and your task is to find a diamond ring in a 10-acre field. Good luck. Now imagine if you have 50,000 people lined up, looking. They're going to find the ring. They're going to find the needle in the haystack. And that's what happened right here. So good work by citizen journalists sharing this, Motor Cow, and everyone else that's been involved. Absolutely. Here's a lawyer I shared on this morning's podcast, The Rush Hour, called Not Actually Golden. I shared the first minute of what they said, but then when I was listening later on, they actually gave a lot more details about the so-called gag order, which is really a protective order. Blake Lively wants a protective order to keep Justin Baldoni from continuing to share all this information. Here's the update we have from Not Actually Golden.
Which would be real interesting. So on the issue of the gag order, which by the way, would not be called a gag order, it would be called a protective order. I know the internet wants to call it a gag order, so I'll call it one. They have filed a third letter. They filed 2 letters with the judge, and now they filed a third. But the third one is different than the first 2. And I think this is where they have sort of added a point or sort of landed on a point that might actually get them some relief, that might actually get the judge to say, okay, that's a bit too far. In the first 2 orders, Lively's people were saying they're putting all this information out and it could hurt the jury pool and it's making me look bad. And I just don't think that's a very strong argument. In the third letter, they are now saying Brian Friedman is out there talking shit about Blake Lively, saying she's a bad person, saying she has bad character, that she's making victims look bad. And once you start talking about the character of people, that changes things in a judge's mind. So I think,
by the way, Not Actually Golden, this TikToker, I think I'm pretty good at sussing out competence. She's good. She's believable. So if she's got the opinion that, like, hey, Blake Lively might have a chance to silence Justin based on the character smearing, I don't know a thing about law at all. But look, I mean, not only does she sound great, she's got books and DVDs behind. I mean, come on, she's well read. I love her. She's my new best friend. Hey, Not Actually Golden, come on the show sometime. Come on, chat.
I think that they have finally made an argument that might land, at least in part. I'll do a video on all the different arguments on the protective order and what I think people are going to say and what I think the judge might do. But they have now landed on, it's more about the fact that he's saying that she's a liar and she's a terrible person. And that might get them some traction. Also, just to note, as a lawyer...
Which might sound frustrating, because in response, Blake's lawyer has said, see, Justin's an abuser. He's getting away with this. So isn't that smearing his character too? That's kind of the thing. It's kind of like you're a parent and it's like, well, who started it? You know what I mean? Either way, great work there by Not Actually Golden. Let's finish off with an update by Popcorn Planet. Oh, Andy boy, here's what he has to say, calling out Blake's brother-in-law for dissing Justin and then kind of backtracking.
I just got in a fight with Blake Lively's brother-in-law. So last night, Blake Lively's brother-in-law, Bart Johnson, seemingly posted an apology to Justin Baldoni, but didn't actually apologize to Justin because he refused to say his name. Needless to say, a lot of folks got mad at him. There was a particular tweet where he quoted Buddha that upset one fan. So you publicly rag on someone on social media before you know any of the facts, then post an egotistical apology, then quote Buddha, who's the fraud now? Now he responded, but that response is now deleted. Thankfully, we here at Popcorn Planet keep receipts. He said, what did I say that wasn't true? Define fraud. I didn't do anything. Phony. And Raquel Kudo says, oh, please, it reeks of self-serving damage control. You rush to judgment, which your faith feels strongly about, right? And intentionally damage another's reputation, Justin's. Just like with Blake's behaviors, people are seeing right through it. Grab your florals and testify, coach.
All right, so look, my thought on this, and I actually commented it. I said I'm totally okay if people change their opinion based on new information. It's a good example of leaving space to get all the info. And again, I think it would be a lot better if we didn't try to. And I'm not saying Andy did this whatsoever. I'm saying like the internet. If we didn't try to dunk on people, but said like rather than try to dunk on you for getting it wrong, let's leave the door open so you could just walk through and get it right. I think that's just a better place. I had this sort of saying I always say that like people are trying the best with the information that they have. And I think with the amount of traction that this case is getting, people have responded in some, with pushing back on that mindset, saying, no, there's so many willfully ignorant people out there with misinformation. And my thought is this, well, what good does it do to just yell at or scold somebody who's getting it wrong? I think the best thing to do is have grace and say they are still trying their best. I think when you look at situations like this, Justin Baldoni made comment on Blake Lively's boobs in 2 a.m. voice note. I think this is preposterous in somebody not trying to get it right. But I don't blame the writer. That could be the editor. And I always say this about corporations. They're kind of psychopathic. They don't feel pain. They're just doing what's best for them. And people can be complicit with unethical behavior when they're working in a corporation, like even New York Times, because it's all about pleasing the boss. It doesn't mean they're necessarily trying their best. But I think in general, people are trying their best. And those that support Blake Lively, for the most part, maybe they're triggered because of an experience where they weren't believed. So I leave space for that. People will look at me and think I'm getting duped, but I don't know. I would encourage folks to try to see the best in others, which, by the way, is one of the core beliefs in the Baha'i religion. I don't even know if I'm actually pronouncing that right, but I've been on the phone with somebody in the Baha'i religion, which is the religion that Justin's a part of. And they said something I want to leave with you guys. They said, if somebody has 10 characteristics you hate, but there's one thing that is good, focus on that one thing. Now, by all means, set boundaries in your life. Don't be walked all over. But if you have a relative that you have to see, or a family member, or a sibling, or a son, or whatever, just try to see the good in them, and then that expands and it'll push away the things you don't like. And in return, you might find out they're not actually a bad guy. I think this works for 99% of things going on in society, and the internet takes away that common ground and makes it so we all get angry at each other. And I'm sure this guy that was defending Blake Lively thought he was doing the right thing. And sure, maybe he's not quick to own up to his issues because he doesn't want to admit fault or whatever, but leave that on him. That's just my thought. It doesn't come from a place of any moral superiority. I'm just sharing with a new audience here a way to kind of find happiness within yourself. It could be, and we'll have a video on this maybe in a day or two, it could be that Blake's own optimism and, Justin's own optimism and Justin's faith was used against him in the sense that they felt like they could walk all over him and rob him of his project. But in the end, we see that shouldn't be the thing that crashes Justin's core beliefs. He obviously has decided he has to fight for himself, but at the same time, don't let that dent who you are as a person. That's what I'm trying to say. All right, more content coming your way. I'll be back with you guys for the afternoon rush hour. That's coming next. I'll have more updates on this story, plus other things going on in the news world. The Rush Hour is the podcast we do every morning, every afternoon, and it's kind of like your water cooler conversation. What happened in the world today? Let's talk about it, and I'll see you then. Bye, guys.